Hola, and welcome to questions. I know we're deep in the sevens, right? So we've got siete A, siete B, y siete C, which I know feels like mucho, but I'm trying to break this down into little palatable chunks, okay? So that it's easier to kind of understand how am I asking questions, and then there'll be a little bit of sentence structure coming up after this one, which will kind of round out the how do I make my sentences make more sense and questions. So let's just get started, shall we? So you may have already looked at 7A, which I definitely encourage taking a peek there because it's going to break down a little bit more of there are two ways to ask a question. And I'm going to recap that in 30 seconds here. But if you're like, oh yeah, I did skip that, or I don't really feel solid on it, then definitely go back. But type number one is a yes or no question. Do you need help? Is there time to complete this project? Can you lift this? And it's sí o no. Muy fácil. Pero el otro tipo, the other type of question, which is less controlled, right? Which means that maybe it's a little harder to understand the answer. So always be careful of asking a question that you're pretty confident you'll know the answer to or understand the answer to. We might ask an interrogative question. And no, we're not in some bad cop drama, right? Where you're getting interrogated by the police. It's not that. But they're called interrogatives where that's kind of the word for who, what, where, when, why, right? So we know all of these in English. They're going to track pretty well to the Spanish. I always promise to keep things brief and then fail, but I really am going to try to keep this pretty short and sweet. If these are brand new to you, you may even want a second pass of this video to test yourself on what each of these are, to try to use them in a sentence. But if you're doing this as review because you're very familiar, then this might be something that we can go through pretty quickly. So I'm just going to point a couple things out here. We may know que, which we're just doing a k, like a letter K sound, and then similar cuáles, right? So that's actually the K. So we got the K sound up here, and then we got like the QW sort of sound for a CU. So the sounds are going to be a little off, but so it's que, cuál, or cuáles, quién, or quiénes, cuánto, or cuántos, cómo, cuándo, por qué, dónde, and a dónde. If those are really fast and you're like, whoa, I do not know how to pronounce these, I want to pronounce them after you, hit rewind, head on back, no problem. But definitely the pronunciation we want to get right because this is the first word you're saying and it's kicking off the question, and it might sound off to somebody if they're not entirely sure which one you were trying to use, cuando or cuánto, right? Like, so we want to reduce confusion. Now, I know it's not lost on you that I have these ES options and an S option for these middle three. So I'm going to kind of skip to that. I know we have que versus cual, which is a constant debate in English or Spanish. When do I say which? When do I say what? So something that I recently came into the understanding of because I was kind of just flying by the seat of my pants for a long time. But basically, if you're going to use a noun next, you're going to want to use what. So like, what movie do you want to watch? ¿Qué película quieres ver? But if you're going to use a verb after, you might want to use cuál. So ¿cuál es la película mejor? Which is the best movie? And then you're making a selection. So if you can think of it that way, fantastic. If you have a pretty firm grasp of when you should be using which versus what in English and you're happy with that, it's not a huge deal. I wouldn't let it slow you down. But if you're pluralizing whatever it is that you're asking about, so which are the best movies, let's say I would need to say cuáles son. So I need to make this a plural question, which we don't actually do other than here. We actually do say how many or how much, which is kind of part of the question word. But so just remember you either have cuál space es, if we're using Sarah, for instance, or cuáles space son, right, would be a plural option for that. So keep that in mind. You got to keep listening, right? Because you may not be able to tell right away if it's a space or not, but you'll know through the rest of the sentence. So just hang in there if you're a little confused by your speaker. Okay, then we have quién and we have quiénes. So this is the same concept of we're plural for who are or something like that, right? As opposed to just who is. English has the same who, so I know that's going to be a little confusing. Bonus point to whoever can explain to me what whom is in English. I've never used whom correctly. I'm sure there's some bearing for that on this lesson plan and the use of quien and quienes. Tell me, write me something. I mean, just let me know, right? Because my English is clearly a little behind. So, ¿quién or quiénes? So you could say, ¿quién es el presidente? ¿Quiénes son los representantes, who are the representatives, whatever, right? Cuánto, cuánta, cuántos, and cuántas. Here's the problem. This is kind of an adjective in a way where it's making that adjustment and it's adjusting the gender. So if you wanted to say cuántas hijas, right? If you want to see that written out, I need to be adjusting right away. I could say cuántas hijas tienes, and then I'm asking how many daughters do you have, but the plural feminine is going to impact this. So I'll ask you, how would you say, how much money is it or does it cost, right? You would be making cuánto match. You wouldn't really say it this particular way. I'll show you the more natural way, but you can say cuánto dinero es, how much money is it? Sounds a little awkward, but the better way to approach this, in my opinion, is just to say cuánto cuesta. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but that's how much does it cost? And so it's bringing in the verb cost, which is costar. I think that's smart. The only downside is you might need to pluralize that too, but just on the verb this time. So it'd be cuánto cuestan los zapatos for plural shoes. So this one is probably the most tricky, the most nuanced. I think if you can say cuánto dinero, if you're shopping, how much money, I mean, it's a little stilted, it's a little basic, but for the time being, it's a way of asking for a quantity. And that's how I want you to remember this one, quantity, right? And that's how maybe you can keep it separate from cuando, because I get a lot of confusion around which is which. Totally understand. Okay. ¿Cómo? We know cómo estás. You're like, come on, teach me something new here. Cómo can also mean, huh? Or like, what? In a very inquisitive, gentle way. I mean, assuming your tone is mirroring that, right? Because it actually turns out that saying que comes across really kind of incredulous or judgmental, perhaps. So maybe somebody says, yeah, I just spent $1,000 on Amazon last week. And you go, okay, you're like, what? Right? Like it's shocking to you or you're upset about it. So better to say como if you're kind of doing this like, huh? I didn't, maybe you didn't catch what they said or you're just confused by what the person has said. We've got cuando. I want you to be thinking, here's a little pop quiz for you. Ser and estar are going to be important here if you haven't already caught on to how much I'm saying who is and what is and all of the whiches. Every time we come to is, it's a fork in the road for us, right? We did lesson 3, lección 3, all about ser and estar. And that may have been sufficient for you. Maybe that was review at the time. Maybe you spent a lot of time on it, but this is yet another oportunidad to practice ser and estar. And it's necessary porque we spent a ton of time on presente, right? Adding a crap load of new verbs into your vocabulary. And that was all we saw for a little while for cinco and seis ve and whatever. So my encouragement to you is to turn that focus back to ser and estar during this lesson today so that we're able to apply those verbs to questions. Because it's very when is, why is, what is, how much, like it's very common that we use to be with these types of questions. Now, if you want to avoid using ser and estar, ask a yes, no question and pick a verb. Do you drive? Yes, no. Okay. Let's try cuando. So with my preamble, I was saying ser and estar were going to be a topic of discussion. Which verb is more común in the use of cuando? Ser o estar? Think about it. I'm going to have a sip of café while you think about it. Porque one is more conducive is my hint. Okay, hopefully you paused if you needed more time. Cuando goes really well with ser because ser is for date and time. It's one of the most forgotten reasons we use ser because you're thinking the clock is, you're watching the clock right now. We're at 10 minutes and 11. So But even though it's constantly changing, as in the time is changing, our timekeeping system and what hour of the day it possibly could be, that is set in stone. That's how I remember it. So if you wanted to say, when is dinner? Let's try that. When is dinner? We would say, and you're pausing if you want to try it yourself, ¿cuándo es la cena, el desayuno, el almuerzo? You can do any meal of the day you want, but this es is coming from ser, right? Because I know that the date and timekeeping system we use is set in stone. That's how I remember that one. Hopefully it's helpful. ¿Cuándo son los Juegos Olímpicos is a way of making this plural, right? ¿Cuándo son los Juegos Olímpicos, which maybe looks more clear now than when I was saying it out loud. That's very common that you're like, what is Olímpicos? It's one word. So this is asking, when are the Olympic Games? Because that's plural. Notice though, I didn't have to change cuando. So it's only in these three cases right here that you're on the hook to make changes for singular, plural, and even gender right here. So it's just a little nuance that we need to know. You want to be a 3-year-old, right? Don't we all? It would be so nice. But if you were a 3-year-old, 3 años, you would probably ask a lot of por qué questions, right? Because things are just interesting and you're curioso and you just want to know why things are the way they are. And then your parent would be saying, por qué, you know, whatever, right? So it's like, por qué I Jeffrey Dahmer in the background, which was my question when I stayed in this Mexico City Airbnb. And the person will respond, por qué advertencias, because advertisements, right? I mean, who knows? So the por qué that we use in reply is going to be one word. And the one that we use in the question has an accent and is dos palabras. So just bear that in mind. If you're doing a lot of Spanish writing, that's the proper way to do that. And then last kind of difficulty for some is, why do I need a donde and donde? And I'm with you. I would say, if I were to just say, how can we keep life simple for a student? You don't have to have a donde. You can get by without it. You'll be understood without it. I like to use adonde with ir. It's a verb I haven't quite covered with you yet. So it's to go. And this is basically trying to say, where are you going? Where are you headed, right? So it kind of has that headed mentality to it. So if I want to say, right here, adonde vas? Okay, that's me asking kind of like, to where are you headed? And that's an English thing, the headed, right? It's obviously has nothing to do with cabeza. So just keep that in mind, that you would use it for things that haven't happened yet. Someone's headed in a direction, or like, you know, in the future. But like a use of donde would just be, donde está Angelica? Where is she, right? Or donde están mis llaves? Where are my keys? Or something like that. Okay, so or donde vives? Where do you live? That's not like an aspirational thing. Future thing. It's just, where currently do you live, right? So it's just a plain where. All right, so I'm going to zoom out on this because I have an ask of you, which is, before you get too much further into Lección 7C or moving into some formulas in 8A, some liking and loving of things in 8B, I would be really solid on these question words, because I know I'm going to say this and make it sound like it's easy. It's not that much vocabulary, right? It's like 8 or 9 palabras nuevas with some caveats here in the middle, but overall, sobre todo, it's not that much vocabulary. Like, remember date and time and stuff where I dropped like 30 vocab words on you. So getting these super solid, I think, would be a good use of time. And just remember that anytime you're working on these and creating a question, you're also practicing verbs and nouns. You're doing the full picture. So it's a really good, like, multi-dimensional practice, I suppose. For those of you that like to weight lift, it's like, basically, you know, are you doing a burpee? I hate burpees, actually. Let me pretend that's not a thing. Like, you're doing a clean, or, you know, like a multifunctional movement that's getting a lot of muscle groups, instead of just, I'm going to do a bicep curl 1,000 times. Okay. Anyway, I digress. So last thing I want to tell you about these words, you notice that they had accents each time. Absolutely. That's on purpose. That's what's telling you on paper, hey, this is an interrogative word. You should also see this upside down. I know this is tiny. Why am I making it tiny? Who knows? This upside down question mark is also your hint in writing that a question is impending, like coming, right? So if you see upside down question mark, you know that you're going to likely see either just heading straight into the verb, that was what we learned in the last video, or you're expecting to see one of these words with the accent on it. You may see these exist otherwise, right? The place where we go for vacation is blah, blah, blah. I don't understand how you have so much free time. It doesn't matter who it is. They're not staying, you know, these sentences where nestled somewhere in the middle, there's a use of this how, which, what, but it's not interrogative. It's not requesting a response. Okay. So first time I think I've done this is using each word only once. I know this throws a lot of people off, and I used to hate this in school because sometimes there's a lot of ambiguity, but my hope is that I wrote these properly enough that you can see each blank and choose just one time and then cross off. You are on the hook to decide if it needs to be plural or not. So keep that in mind. And then you'll have the opportunity, oportunidad de intentar. You're going to have some conversations with yourself. Okay. If you're not already doing this because you're like a sane person, fantastic, but I'm forcing you to pretend you're not. So you're going to ask a question and then answer it, because if you don't have a good idea of what the answer would be, you're going to feel like unprepared, right? So if you ask a question, like let's say you learn ¿Cómo te va? Right? Which is how's it going? But you have no idea what the answer is. If somebody pitches it back to you and says, yeah, y tú, and you're like, crap, I don't actually know what that means. So just try to pick things that you know what the question you're asking is, and then a reasonable response from somebody you'd be asking it to. So I encourage you to think about, what are the interactions I'm going to be having? Am I a nurse and I'm going to be asking a patient's mom something? Am I going to be on the beach and I'm going to be getting sold something? Because that happens occasionally. And I'm asking about the price. Like, try to, put yourself in the scenario you're going to be in. Are you posing the question or are you answering it? Either way, you're filling in both blanks here so that you have a full understanding of what's going on. Okay. And of course, I've provided no help for you, but feel free to reach out of, hey, I don't know if I got this quite right. This is where the rubber is meeting the road of, man, I got to put a verb in. I got to put a subject in. I got to maybe put a noun in. What if I wanted to add an adjective? Where does that go? Which is my shameless plug for the next video, which is siete se. It's going to go through some incredibly nerdy grammatical things that are going to help you select the right word in the right place, make modifications if necessary based on the situation, right? Because now that we're writing oraciones, right? Basically effective lesson 3, 5, 6, we started putting it all together where okay, now I have a subject and I have a verb, and then I need something else to make it a full sentence. How are we doing that and making it more complex, sound more nativo? So that's going to be our mission in siete se. I hope to see you back for that, but just know it's a little grammar-y. It's a little specific, and I'm going to start expecting that you already know how to pose a question 2 ways. You know how to ask it just, do you want a coffee, yes or no? Or how much coffee do you want? Or what do you take in your coffee, which would be a more interrogative way of using a que or a como or a cual. So you want to be really solid on those before you head into the next frontier, which is the next video. Write as many questions as you can think of. It's fun for conversation too. If you are a person that has Spanish speakers in your world, think about if you could ask a question. And I would start with some close-ended ones where it's just a yes or no, because you're going to feel really confident when you see that head nod or the sí or the no or the tal vez, like a maybe. You're going to feel really good that you were able to pose and answer that question in your head. Oh, I know exactly what they said. So felices estudios, I suppose. Happy studies, plural. And I'll see you in the next video when you are ready. Get some good practice in on this. Let it simmer. We can always work on, even if you're an advanced student right now doing a review, throw in some different tenses, like make this work for you, make it exciting to use all of these different question words in a couple different ways. And when you're all set, I'll see you in the next video. Hasta entonces.